Hi, everybody, and welcome to another Kalicube Tuesdays. Today's guest is Elizabeth Marsten. I kept writing it with a D and got told off, not by Elizabeth, but by the graphic designer who noticed my terrible mistake. So welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Yeah, absolutely delighted. We're going to start with a quick word about Ukraine. I actually realized as I was preparing for this that this image is from over a month ago. And so for over a month now, our friends in Ukraine have been defending their freedom. And, let's help them. I think that we need to maintain that support, maintain that help, stand with Ukraine. The war seems to be dragging on, and the continued courage of the Ukrainian people is astonishing. Now we're going to move on to the actual show itself. And it starts with a song which changes the mood. A quick hello and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
I can say I've never had that happen before. That is amazing. I'm glad I came.
Right, we could stop now and everyone will be happy.
Yeah.
Wonderful stuff, absolutely brilliant. I always start the episodes with an analysis of your brand SERP. I just take one thing that I found interesting. So if we can show that up there. Your brand SERP came up and we've kind of impinged upon it. Down there you can see the image from this show. Google seems to like to put those up the two or 3 days before the show, and then they seem to disappear away again, which is delightful. And I was looking at that. Why have I covered up your face with a big white space? It's because there's no knowledge panel. But then when I looked on mobile, which is the next screen, there is, and it's a beautiful knowledge panel.
I need to claim it.
Excuse me?
I need to claim it. I haven't claimed it yet.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. It's lovely. And I noticed that it comes from Freebase. So you have been added, or somebody added you to Freebase many, many years ago. And this is actually a knowledge panel triggered by Freebase from 10 years ago, let's say.
Yep.
That is still surviving. It's kind of hanging on in mobile, but not in desktop.
I'm now remembering too, because it was the first agency I was at. I remember we went through everyone that was on like director above. We went through a burn down list and we were just like, go claim your profiles on all these places. So that's probably how that came about.
Right. Oh, so you were doing brand cert management before I was even involved in it. So
It was like we had dabbled in reputation management. We had a couple of clients for it. And so like, oh, we should do our own stuff. And so for like this 3-week long effort of do your thing, and then we did the thing, and then we never thought about it again. So it goes to show how long it can persist.
You said the word reputation management, and I've been terribly kind of, I don't know, naive, and I've been thinking, oh, brand SERPs isn't reputation management, but it is. There's a big chunk of that in there. So I'm now embracing that and saying brand SERPs is a big part, proactive and reactive reputation management, which is kind of freeing me up to talk more honestly about the fact that, cleaning up reputations is something that brand SERPs can do. And before we get on with the show, we're going to be talking about retail media in search, which is astonishingly interesting. I've read your blurb and I'm terribly, terribly intrigued now. So I'm really looking forward to this. Before we do that, quick word from the sponsors, Ahrefs, generously sponsoring the show, keeping us on air. And I thought that today we could show some quotes of their users that I found on their sites. I thought it might be an original way to announce a sponsor, and you obviously can read what's on the screen. Oh, no, you can't actually if you're listening to the podcast, and I hadn't thought of that. And I now feel suddenly a little bit foolish. But we've got lots of quotes of people who absolutely love Ahrefs and what it does for them and how it's helped them with their SEO work. So amazing. Thank you, Ahrefs. On to the show with Elizabeth. So retail media in search. First thing I thought was, what is it?
So it's funny is retail media as we think of it today probably didn't exist until about 3-ish years ago now. Really, it's been around forever when you think about, the physical buying something in a paper circular or couponing. You could technically qualify that. Anything on the website, pre-existed, I'm sure, 10 years ago. As soon as a Walmart or a Target launches their website and they had advertising on it, technically it's retail media. But what we have today, that everything is coming around to, where you see all the big e-marketer forecasts for, and you see it now in earnings reports. So like Walmart and Target have started to break out how much money they're making from advertising, which is retail media. It has really started to take off, especially as the deprecation of third-party cookies, and retailers are realizing that they can monetize their first-party data that they've been collecting for the better part of 20 plus years in some cases.
Oh, right. So it means that these big retailers are kind of saying, because of the third-party cookie issues, they're actually kind of turning around and thinking, well, what can we now do? And it's turning out to be an advantage, a bonus, a
It's pretty
surprise.
lucrative depending on the retailer. So the larger retailers like a Walmart or a Target are able to, they have deeper pockets, right? So they can invest initially on their tech stack, whether or not they build it or buy it. So like Walmart has elected to build it. So they built sponsored search engine on walmart.com, which is kind of interesting when you think about, like, for those of you out there who do paid search, understand what an undertaking that can be technologically, right? Just even, and it's
Right.
keyword based with different match types. So, you keep adding in, and that's a massive piece of tech. And then you have like a Target that works with an SSP or a sell side platform like Criteo. So they bought it rather than build it.
Right.
And you know what? That's okay too, because you look at that and you go, as a paid search person, you look at it and go, well, I understand, because that is a massive undertaking. And then just the support and the maintenance and the upgrades, and as
Mm.
you keep up and evolve. And then you have other retailers that aren't the biggest retailers, but they still have, single digit billions that they do, or multiple chains. Maybe they have like 400 stores, which you
Right.
think, when you think about it, 4,700 Walmart stores is a lot. Um,
Yeah.
and then you compare to, say, like a more local grocery market that might have only 32. But when you really think about it, 32 is kind of a lot too. Like, that's a lot of revenue.
Right. Yeah. No, sure. I mean, I kind of, when you say 4,200 stores, I think it's outside my capacity to understand what that actually means in terms of the number of products that are actually sitting on shelves in
It's
these things.
insane. And then think about most of those products are also online, right? Because if
Yeah.
they want you to be able to buy online and pick up in store, the product has to be available online.
Now, that's incredibly complex to make sure that when you're actually offering it for pickup in store, that's a big logistical deal as well, without even the search engine. But the two probably go together, don't they?
They do. And so when you think about, there's two types of search, right? So there's the on-site search on the retailer, which
Mhm.
functions a lot like classic Google search, or what we would optimize for when it comes to Google, but they do have differentiators on site for sure. They have different weights that they take
Mm.
into account. Could be anything from previous purchase history to loyalty card information to brand affinity, that kind of stuff. They're not nearly as sophisticated as Google is today, so the maturity is
Sure.
definitely not there yet. We're working on that. There's definitely some bugs that we found as we go through this. And it's funny, is, as someone from with a Google background, you understand what it could be. So like, you see where it is today, and then you think about like how Google was in 2006 when I started, and you can start to wrap your head around what it could be. And
Right.
so in Google, when you search also for a product, you'll notice that perhaps there's a list of retailers that follow, because Google likes to give you a variety, right? So you search for a product, it'll either get you'll get some shopping results, right? So here's the places you can buy it. You might get a knowledge panel, depending on
Mhm.
if you just search for a brand name or you put in different differentiators with it. You could get a Walmart page, a Target page, a Kroger page, a Best Buy page, a Home Depot, whatever it is. And you can also get the brand's website and possibly social profiles. And so it really starts to get interesting when you think about what it means to be a brand in search, and how
Right.
that can permeate into other search engines.
Right. Yeah. I mean, from you're absolutely though talking absolutely about what I'm totally mad about, which is the idea of when you search a brand name, what does it show you? Google shows you what it can figure out about the brand, a representation of that brand, and hopefully you can control that brand message to a maximum extent. But also different ways you can interact and engage with the brand, which would be different places you could buy whatever products it is they're selling, but also the social media and so on and so forth. Um, and to what extent are major brands actually looking at this kind of granular effect beyond just their own brand name, but also the brand plus other words and product names?
Some do pretty well, and then some don't do it all. Like, they don't necessarily have made the realization, and part of it has to do with the way that organizations are siloed, right? So the
Right.
search person or the SEO guy, or um, excuse me, you remember, I don't know, as far as not even 8 years ago, where you would say, who's in charge of the website, and they go, oh, the IT guy, and you're like, that's going to end well. He's going to totally not argue with me about these page titles that I'd like to change, or the
Right.
fact that meta keywords aren't a thing. But anyway, excuse me. But that's one of it. And then the other part of it is kind of interesting, is where I see it evolving to, which is as the retailers stand up these services and whatnot, depending on your category, you may not even use Google anymore. In fact, you probably don't today for some of these items.
Right.
And in a way, what I'm doing, that's kind of what I want. Google is a competitor to me in some ways, right? So if you need toothpaste, do you go to Google, or do you just go to the retailer that you're going to add to cart and then go pick it up at?
Very good point. Yeah,
Where are you
because I
going to do
think,
your product research too?
yeah, I mean, for toothpaste, it would be just I've got a preferred retailer. I go to that site and I figure it out on that site, and the search engine on that site is what I'm going to be using, which I hadn't really considered. But I was talking to JP Sherman, who works with Red Hat, and he does their internal knowledge graph to build their search engine. I'm wondering, because he was saying that really helps him with the work on ranking in Google. Have you found the same kind of approach? Is that the more you build your internal search engine and your own internal knowledge graph, the better you perform in Google search?
Yes, but is not connected to retailers, right? So they have their own universe, which is kind of what's complicating this even more. Is if you think about, I'm in 5 different stores. I now have, counting Google, let's say in Microsoft, I now have 7 different organic locations in
Right.
which my brand can appear, and I need to know, should probably go look and see what it looks like and what happens, and understanding internally on those individual retailer search engines, what are the things that they care about? Because to the point about personalization, right? So we all know, 10 years ago, someone would ask you, client would call you and be like, my ad's not showing up, and you're like, well, are you signed in? It's always the first question that you had to ask, was whether to determine whether or not there was a personalization issue or a budget issue at hand. And it's going to be similar with, if you go to bestbuy.com and they have, and you'll say you're logged in, you're going to get, probably within the next couple of years, you're going to see a different search result than anybody else.
Which brings me to the question, obviously there is a disadvantage in terms of technology and data, user data, and also search data, but for these companies, when they're creating their internal search engines, and their users' expectations are led by what Google is providing. But that disadvantage, is it counterbalanced by the fact that you're using incredibly detailed user data that you've collected over years, and so you can actually give them the results that really make sense?
Only if they do that. So we're at a point where that totally makes sense. And this is where people like you and me are going to come to them and say, this is not the experience I expect because. And so then the onus becomes on the retailer to adjust and to build out their capability to give people that experience. And so it kind of puts them in a corner, but at the same time, it's a corner that we all benefit from if they do it right. And some of them are taking those, are pretty sophisticated today in terms of those personalization signals, and some of them are not. I mean, you'll know, like you'll go to a retailer site, you'll make a search, and you'll be like, well, that was not what I thought was going to happen. And you'll know like what's happening.
Right. And another question, which is, I was talking to Andrea Volpini from WordLift, who's obsessed by the idea that businesses should be building knowledge graphs, and then the website is simply a representation of their internal knowledge graph. Are you seeing companies going to that point? With retail, that's absolutely perfect, because if you build your knowledge graph of your categories with your products and their attributes, and you build that properly, representing it in a website and then representing it to Google becomes theoretically an absolute piece of cake. But probably
theoretically, it's tough, right? Because let's say you're a brand that is sold in retailers, but you also have a D2C site. The question then becomes, where do you want them to buy from you? And so we're always pushing, oh, well, wherever the customer is ready, whenever they're ready. But at the same time, like, how does a brand stay a brand when they're on 6 different retailer sites? And each one of these retailers offer different ways in which to represent your brand, and some of them at a pretty hefty price. So like Instacart and Amazon offer brand experiences, right? So they have brand stores or brand pages. So places that you can host video, lifestyle images, make it so that folks can engage, even just throw one of those pictures in, with the product in somebody's hands so they can get a sense of how big it is. That's my favorite picture. I'm like, oh, so that's how big it is. But then you have some that will charge quite a bit. And not only will they charge you to have it, but they de-index it in Google. Like, it is intentionally de-indexed, and you can only find it if you drive media to it. And then when the media is over and the campaign's over, it just sits out there.
Oh, right. Oh, I didn't realize. Kind of holding you hostage with that content.
Yes, and if you want to upgrade it or change it, you can't. You have to pay.
Right. Okay. I mean, that doesn't put the retail, the providers off. I mean, that's still a decent way to do business. I mean, I would have thought it would put everybody off, and they
I
would
think it
say, well,
sucks, but for certain brands of certain sizes, like they can afford to do that and they need to do that. And when you think about like who your number one customer is, it's not, John on Elm Street. It could be a retailer if you're a brand. Like the answer could be retailer X or retailer Y, and it could represent 70% of your business. In which case, however much it costs to do a brand page it's worth it.
right. Okay. And another question, which is more to do with Google once again, is to what extent are these major brands paying attention to which sites are appearing, which outlets are appearing when you search their product or their brand names? Is it something they're looking into to see if they can control where Google will send their users or their potential
I'm
clients?
sure there's some that are doing it that way, that have thought that far apart, that think that way. But again, I think it comes back to that siloed piece, because you're at a brand, everybody's like, they're all in their different teams. You've got the search team, you've got the paid search team, you've got the shopping team, you got the social team, you got the shopper marketing team, you got the brand team. However, but who owns that responsibility? Is it the brand team? Is it
Right.
the search team, or is it the paid search team? And then if they all report to different VPs or directors or whatever, like, and they don't talk,
Right.
you're dependent on a couple of people realizing it and raising their hands and saying, "Hey, we got to do something about this."
And that doesn't happen very often. I mean, from what you're suggesting, is there's an
I
awful lot of
don't.
siloing.
I think just by like the nature of people, it probably doesn't happen very often.
Right. And I mean, that horizontal communication, I mean, we were talking to Tom Critchlow about that, and he was saying one thing an SEO can do is actually communicate with these different teams because we have the data, as he said.
Yep.
Is that something pragmatically reasonable, or is it unrealistic in this
It's
situation?
absolutely reasonable. It's just interesting is
Sorry.
like in the 3 years that I've been doing retail media, I have yet to have an SEO person say anything or
Right.
be connected to or have that question come up. I've gotten a few questions around paid search and overlap and some of
Mhm.
the D2C things, because one of the things what we look out for is obviously driving up the CPC. But unless you are, as a brand, engaging with the retailer to help pay for those search placements, those paid search placements,
Mm.
it's not your problem.
All right. Okay. That's very different. You were
I
talking
mean,
about driving up this.
technically.
Yeah, driving up the CPC within your internal search. I mean, kind of, I look at Amazon. My association was Amazon does this. They have their advertising. They've got this amazing product knowledge graph. They can push this stuff to you. Google has the information from the web. They don't have a product knowledge graph, whereas Amazon have the product knowledge graph, but don't have the information from the web. And it hadn't really occurred to me about a company like Walmart or Target. To what extent can they get people onto their platform and willing to pay, or brands rather, onto their platform and willing to pay?
So they have a few different ways to do it. So there's obviously paid search. So
Mhm.
Amazon does this. It's something at Tenuity we track. So our VP of research, Andy Taylor, often
Mm.
keeps track of when Amazon enters and exits the Google Shopping universe,
Oh,
right?
right. Oh, that's interesting. When
Oh
does
yeah.
it? Or you're not
So
allowed to share?
no, so he publishes it. I want to say there's a few articles already out there, like Search Engine Land, I know is one, and obviously the Tenuity blog. He's probably got something, but and then our quarterly marketing reports. It should be in the Google version,
Right.
but we do watch kind of to see, because it does change, right? So because when Amazon enters the auction, it's not small. Like,
Yeah.
it's very obvious that they're there, and in and in and it's very clearly tactical. Like, it's not like they just went around and were like, let's see what categories. They know what categories they're going to go after and to what volume and for how long. A lot of times we'll see it ramp up right before Prime Day, for example,
Right.
which makes
But
sense.
when you say tactical, do you mean tactical within a strategy, or just tactical one shots every now and then to see what happens? Do you think they
Within a
have a
strategy, I think
right?
they know. I think they know what products. So within the Amazon ecosystem, they know the velocity, right, in which a
Right.
product will move. They understand the pricing. They understand what the possible margins are. They understand how much money they stand to make if that product is
Right.
sold by them versus a third party. So taking that and then being able to apply that to a product list and say, all right, we can afford X amount of budget through Google Shopping to push sales to these product pages to generate additional lift at whatever CPC. Like, they're going to know. They have that level of detail if
Right.
they wanted to apply it. And so, whether or not it is applied to that level consistently, I don't know, because I don't work for Amazon, but
No.
the pieces are certainly all there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was also thinking about kind of seasonality and trending products. That must be an incredible advantage they have. They see products as they start to trend, and they can
Yep.
push the Google ads, which would presumably then be cheaper at the beginning, until
They
everybody
push them to these
realizes a
product
trend
detail
going.
pages. It's all about their flywheel, right? So they get the eyeballs on those pages, especially say like before Prime Day. Even if someone just saves it to a list or puts it in cart and like saves it, they know, and they absolutely use that information.
Right. Okay. Oh, dearie, I hadn't thought about that either. I mean, and from the Amazon perspective, as you said, it's a massive, massive budget, and I see them reasonably a lot. I mean, shopping for stuff. I just bought a new MacBook. They're going to be bidding on that. That's something, at least in France.
Probably not. I don't
Oh,
know. Did you buy it from Amazon
no,
and
I
not
didn't.
Apple?
I bought it from Apple.
Yeah. So they're gonna. So but that's to the strategy, right? So they're gonna. It's very. What we've noticed is it's very intentional, either by category, and it's less brand focused and more item, like solving a problem kind of thing. So when you think about a category that's good for them is like kitchen and houseware accessories, right? So things that are unisex, solve a problem someone would have searched
Right.
for. They're going to have a great price. They're going to get it to you in 2 days. Like, they're massively competitive there.
Right. Yeah, and I kind of, as you were talking, I've been thinking, and this is going on a bit about Amazon, but I do think now you mentioned toothpaste, but I was looking for a USB Thunderbolt cable, and my immediate reaction wasn't to search on Google, it was to look on Amazon,
Yeah.
which is shameful, I know.
It's okay. It's okay. So at Tenuity, I'm in the marketplaces department. So retail media and marketplaces are one. So Amazon is our lion's share of the business there. So because Amazon's obviously older, so I sit very closely with the Amazon team.
Oh, right. Okay. So you know a lot more about all this, obviously, than
I've
the
had a
average.
I've had a long winding career. So I mean, started in paid search with Google. I even still have my original Yahoo Ambassador search certificate from like 2006. I just couldn't bring myself to throw it away, and
Oh, wow.
then ended up
That
in
that must be a
marketplaces.
collectible now, eh?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I should probably never throw it away. And then I ended up in marketplaces, Amazon, eBay, Walmart, even Jet for a little while
Right.
there, where I was at Commerce Hub with Google and Facebook's original marketplace. I was there for the
Oh,
buy on Google, the first buy button.
right. Oh, I hadn't. Sorry, I hadn't remembered eBay. What do eBay do that the others don't? Because we've been talking a lot about Amazon.
eBay's
eBay is
interesting.
interesting.
Yes, they are. Oh my. So I struggle with
Oh,
what to do with them in the retail media universe periodically, just because they're interesting. They have scale. They're big enough, but the problem has to do with, and you have to have an eBay strategy to be on eBay as a brand, right?
right.
So when we think about eBay today, we think about, mom and pop sellers, or like, oh,
Yeah.
I got this thing that I want to offload and it doesn't belong on Poshmark, whatever it is, right? And but they're about 80-ish%, if not more, items on eBay are new. So depending on your category, eBay can be a really great place to sell. So I've seen some brands do very specific strategies around. So like Dyson, if you go and look
Mm.
on eBay in the US for Dyson, you will find all their refurbished products. So what they've done is they take all the returns and
Ooh,
whatever, and they sell those via eBay. And it makes perfect sense because you're going to have limited inventory, but you
right.
already have all the product information. You control the pricing. And then from an advertising standpoint, it's a cost of sale. So instead of paying a CPC or CPM, you only pay if the item sells. So someone clicks on it and buys it.
All right.
And you bid on, you tell eBay how much of the sale you're willing to, surrender,
Oh,
in order to get it. And it's great because people shop around, right? And they click and they go back and they do
yeah.
this and they go that, and they rack up those CPCs. But with eBay, it's cost of sale.
That I absolutely didn't know that, so I'm now totally mind blown because I mean that idea is saying, you know, that's a really simple way of figuring out you've got your margin, I can give you this much,
Yep.
and that
I love it. It's hard because it doesn't fit in the classic retail media story with brands that have in-store presence, right? But it fits better with, say, like a brand that has a clearance strategy that they want to, or a refurbishment strategy, or is digital only. So, like, if you're also on eBay, you're probably like on Wayfair or I don't know, some Amazon, right?
right. Okay. And you talked about the Facebook marketplace. I mean, that I didn't even know they had a marketplace, which
Oh,
shows
they
how
do.
much I don't use Facebook. Tell me about that because I've got no idea either that it exists
So,
or how it works.
so it's like a elevated Craigslist-ish. So you have Craigslist, right? Or something
Yeah, well,
similar
I've
to that?
heard of it. I've never used it. I thought it was a
It's
very
it's an
strange.
online marketplace where you list stuff, right? And you're buying from people. And there's a ton of them now in terms of, like, buy nothing and cashless and whatever. But with them, it was you can list things as an individual seller, but also they have a capability to do brand new items. So if you have a Facebook account in the US and you scroll the marketplace, you'll start scrolling through listings and you'll see local listings in your area from sellers nearby, but you will also see net new items. So a lot of times you'll see jewelry or
Hmm.
fragrance or sometimes shoes or home electronics, whatever it is. But that is a additional arm of the Facebook marketplace, is net new items, where you can sell things in quantity. So you have 500 of a thing instead of just one used baby crib.
Right. Okay. I never knew there were quite so many ways to sell things through third parties online. I think it's something it's very easy as a brand to get lost in. I mean, how can you possibly manage all of those
It's
different
insane. They also have something called collaboration ads where some
Oh,
retailers have signed up with them, and you can go through that retail. If you as you connect it as a brand, you can go through that retailer's Facebook profile to buy Facebook ads to drive to the retailer's website your product pages.
oh, right. So you advertise for their product page, for their sorry, their marketplace page to sell your products, which
So
presumably
it's just in
means.
Facebook advertising.
Oh,
It's
right.
So depending on so some retailers have done it. I will say I looked at the list of retailers, and it's definitely not the top 25, but there's if it's a smaller retailer that's only got 4 or 5 locations and
Hmm.
that's what you're in, that could be a really cost effective way to drive traffic to your product pages on retailer X's site.
Absolutely brilliant. That was a delightful conversation full of things that I didn't even think I wanted to know, let alone knew I didn't know. Elizabeth, that was genius and brilliant and wonderful. And thank you so much.
Thank you
I
for
hope
having me.
Oh, it was an absolute pleasure. I hope everybody else out there enjoyed it. We're going to announce next week, which is going to be Kim Krause Berg talking about accessibility. If we can have that screen up, there you go. Better web accessibility improves profits. She is delightful. She's super smart. She knows absolutely boatloads about accessibility and how it improves profits and how it improves SEO. And I think that's something a lot of people miss. Elizabeth, could you possibly pass the baton to Kim?
I will. I will do it digitally, and I will do it sort of physically right here.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. That was absolutely brilliant. You get the outro song. You like the intro song. The outro song is exactly the same. A quick goodbye to end the show. Thank you, Elizabeth.
That was awesome. What a good way to start a day. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's your start of day, my end of day. And we've got the outro animation from Anton. Kalicube. It's all about your